Hello and welcome to NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Today we're coming to you from the Nairobi National Park here in the heart of the capital city. And this episode is all about grass. Yes, this stuff, grass. Now apparently there is a lot to learn and know about grass. It's meant to be really fascinating, and one man who's going to tell us all about that is Dino Martins. He is a naturalist, and many of you might actually remember him from our episode on insects. Dino is also an entomologist, which means he studies insects. Great to have you back on the show. Welcome to NTV Wild Talk.
Thank you very much, Smriti, and a pleasure to be back on the show with you today.
Thank you. Now, Dino, where we are is pretty fascinating. We are standing in the middle of a grassland. It looks like a field of gold because the grass is pretty dry, but explain to us more about where we are.
We're here in the Nairobi National Park, standing in what's called the tall grass savanna. And you can see behind us the beautiful acacia trees. We've got these wonderful tall Hyperrhenia grasses.
This is Hyperrhenia?
Hyperrhenia, which is one of the thatching grasses.
Okay.
So if you go to different parts of Kenya, you'll find people use this to thatch their houses.
Right.
And this is one of over 100 different species of grass that occurs right here in Nairobi National Park.
100 species in one park.
In one park.
Who would have thought? I mean, so many people, when they tend to look at grass, including me, you just think, oh, it's grass. You know, you don't think that actually there's a different species of grass. So 100, that's a huge amount. And what about the grass species across the country?
So there are about 620 species in Kenya.
Really?
And that's remarkable. It's a center of diversity. But to really understand that, we've got to go back in time a little bit. Are you ready to step back in time?
I am ready for anything because I'm really curious to learn how fascinating grass actually can be or is.
It really is. So if we were standing here in the Miocene, which would be about 15-20 million years ago, this landscape would have actually been quite similar in that grasses were just starting to become the dominant plant species in this habitat. That's well before even the city of Nairobi or even us as a species came into existence. But grasses started playing a role then as the African continent experienced drier weather.
Okay.
And this allowed the spread of these remarkable plants, and I'll show you, we'll look at them closely in a moment.
Yeah.
But right here we've got so many different species of these tall grasses, and they tend to grow in areas that are slightly wetter. And Nairobi National Park has this lovely gradient from the forest all the way down to the Athi Basin. And right here we can see a lot of the grass has been flattened.
Yes, I noticed that because we've got some grass like just behind us that's almost taller than I am and you as well. But then we've also got grass that is flattened, as you say. Why is that?
That's because lots of animals who feed on grass have also been using it as a mattress.
Okay, it can be comfortable then.
It makes, actually, why don't you feel it? See, if you sit down here, isn't that a nice comfortable place to sit?
Oh gosh, I hope I don't get covered in ticks and bugs.
We'll get a few ticks, but that's okay.
And then there's cow dung, or sorry, not cow dung, buffalo dung.
We've got buffalo dung, we've got zebra dung right here.
Yeah, oh.
And we've also got some impala and hartebeest dung.
Oh, wow.
But if you open up the zebra dung...
Okay, oh, charming. You just opened that like it was a piece of fruit. Okay, well, so this is zebra dung.
Yes, and this is really, really important to look at because what do you see in there? You see lots of little fibers.
Yes.
That's because those are the fibers that come from the grass. You see, if we crush the grass amongst our fingers, we see the same, more or less the same substance. And that's because the zebras have been feeding in this grass, and they are grazers, as are many different animals.
Right.
And one of the reasons we have all this incredible wildlife in East Africa is thanks to this stuff, thanks to this habitat that is so precious and so important. And if we just walk a short distance, we'll be able to see some more grass species, but also to start understanding why is it that this habitat can support so many different big animals and small animals.
Sure, I think, you know, Dino, so many people probably take grass for granted. You don't realize that actually the rich green color adds so much color and life to our lives, and also the gold color. But like you're saying, you know, different animals benefit. We benefit in so many ways, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And yeah, I've got to say that lying down here, this is very comfortable.
Yes.
And, you know, when people do get out there, sometimes they do say, oh, let's go to the park or whatever and chill out on the grass. So, all right, let's get close up to some of the species.
Okay.
So Dino, what do we have here?
You can see here we're moving out of the very tall grass into an area where the grass is slightly shorter.
Yeah.
And that's because we're entering a place where a different species is growing, and we have a red oat grass mixed in with a number of other species, and these are grasses that taste much better and they're much easier for animals to eat. And so these grasslands in Nairobi National Park are vital ecosystems in that they support big herds, but they do other things as well. And I want to show you right here, because this is an amazing location to understand this. First of all, you can feel this is all very springy.
Yeah.
And it's, you could almost bounce, have a game on it.
Sure.
And if we start parting the grass here, because this is a healthy, robust grassland.
And how can you tell that?
Well, the grass is ripening and mature. You've got lots of dung from lots of animals feeding on it. Here's some more dung.
Yeah.
We also have a very nice, healthy layer, as you can see as we pull down here. Look at that soil. You can almost feel how rich it is.
Oh yeah.
You know, that is what grasslands are really good at doing, building up soil.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, as much as we see what's above ground, as beautiful and as thick and lush as it is, it's what's beneath the ground that really matters more. And for all of these African grasses, only about 20 to 30% of the biomass is above ground.
Wow.
And the rest of it, the root systems, are much more extensive. So what you see above ground is actually maybe 5 times more below ground.
Really?
And that's where a lot of the biodiversity actually is. Insects, fungi, bacteria, worms, all kinds of things that are building up this ecosystem, allowing this grassland to survive and supporting all this amazing biodiversity.
Wow, the grass is in some places so tall as it is, and to think that so much more is happening beneath the soil. That's amazing. And the fact that you say this is healthy interests me, because for me it looks really dry. I wouldn't have considered this as healthy grass.
Yeah. So it's the dry season now,
right.
So that's why the grass is drying out. But we'll see in a little bit where we go later where it's overgrazed and the difference in diversity and in the ecosystem there.
Okay, so what next? What can you show us some of the different species of grass so I can actually look and compare and see if I can figure out the differences?
Absolutely. You're going to learn a few of the grasses today. So let's walk back to the road.
Okay.
Because along the road we'll see a few more species.
All right.
And we'll start with this beautiful tall grass, the Hyperrhenia, which we already met earlier.
Hyperrhenia.
Hyperrhenia. And you can see she's one of the most elegant plants in Kenya.
Yeah.
Look at that. You know,
standing so tall.
Yeah. And they're just ripening now, and they shed their seeds. That's what's happening at the moment.
How can you identify different grasses? Obviously they look different in appearance if you look carefully, but for some people they all look the same.
That is true. And even this very different species might look similar. And a key way of telling them apart is to look closely at the seeds.
Okay. So these are the seeds?
These are the seeds, yes.
Wow, so grass have seeds too.
They do have seeds. And if you think about it, most of the food that we eat as a species, maize, millet, sorghum, wheat, oats, rye, sugarcane, rice, these are all grasses.
Yeah.
So the major crops that we grow and feed on as a species are all grasses. We'll discuss that in a moment.
Okay.
But right now you can see the seeds are falling out. And notice each seed has a little tail to it. There.
Yes.
And that's because it helps in two ways. One, as animals walk by, they, as we've already seen, they stick onto your clothing.
Right, yeah.
And then get stuck in there. And when you disperse it, either you or an animal can move the seed around two, we'll see in a moment, a very remarkable grass species that buries itself in the soil.
Okay.
And actually is able to move.
A grass species that can move?
Yes. The seeds can move. They can bury themselves.
Okay, let's go.
So here we are at the edge of the road, and there's a nice clump of red oat grass right here.
I would never know that this is red oat grass because it doesn't look like red and it doesn't look like oats, but it looks like grass.
It does. And now at the end of the end of the rains, the beginning of the dry season, you can see this is the red oat grass. It's shed most of its seed, but it's got this beautiful copper color to its stems, and if you see it earlier in the year, it does have that reddish hue to it. And this is arguably one of the most important grasses in Nairobi National Park.
Why?
Almost all the grazers love to feed on this particular grass species. It's extremely nutritious. It doesn't have a lot of hairs or spikes. It's rich in protein, rich in other nutrients. The red oat grass is a fantastic species for many different animals to feed on. But what is really exciting about the different diversity of grasses, here we have some star grass. And you can see that's also very pretty. It's shedding its seeds again, grows more in the open areas along the edge of the road.
Okay, and I'm trying to count if it has 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5 points like a star.
Some of them have 4 and some of them have 5.
Okay.
It depends on the how they grew.
Right.
We have Ceteria here, yet another species. But if we were to wander through this grassland, we would find shining top grass. We would see a very tall grass called guinea grass or panicum. We have grasses like love grass that are probably one of the most beautiful plants in the world.
Oh wow!
And so all of these different species are one of the reasons we have so many different animals that feed on grass, because different animals feed on different species and also feed in different ways.
So a zebra would feed on one particular type of grass and a buffalo would feed on a different type?
Different type. And what both zebra and buffalo do that are in terms of grassland ecology is they can feed on this stuff. And you can see here, if you had to eat that, that would be quite hard work.
Yeah, definitely.
and zebra have both the teeth as well as the digestive system to cope with this and to take the energy that's tied up in that tough fiber and make it available both to themselves, but also when it comes out the other end in the dung, it's now spreading nutrients throughout the ecosystem.
So Dino, of course, all the grazers eat grass. That means all of this grass that surrounds us must be extremely nutritious for them.
It is nutritious and it also isn't nutritious.
Okay.
And so one thing is the grass needs to be eaten, but it doesn't make it easy for the grazers in that a lot of the nutrients are locked up in that tough fiber, and in order to digest it, they've got to enlist the help of bacteria that live in their stomachs. And in many species, they have to break it down, chop it into smaller pieces for the bacteria to do their work, and they do that through rumination, by having a chambered stomach and regurgitating after they feed, re-chewing it and then sending it through the digestive process.
You know, when we talk about the bigger picture and the importance of grass, it contributes to the natural cycle of life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And a reason that happens is I'll show you here at the edge of the road. How can grass survive being eaten over and over and over again? And as we can see right here, that the way the grass grows, you see here's a little clump.
You see, this grass is probably what most people would be used to seeing.
Yeah, and that's what animals love to eat. The young, tender shoots full of nutrients.
Bright green.
Bright green, soft, easy to chew, easier to digest. But you'll notice here that the grass has been grazed back, but the growing point, all the shoots coming out from the base of the plant. And that's because the growing point remains down at the bottom of the plant, unlike most plants which grow from the tips, from the ends of the plant. And so long as it has a chance to regenerate, this can be eaten back 100 times and it will keep growing.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing that it can just be consumed and it'll come back, which of course is so important because, like I said, Dino, the cycle of life, without this grass, there would be no grazers because they'd have nothing to survive on. And without the grazers, there'd be no lions, leopards, cheetahs, because they would have nothing to eat.
There is a verse in the Bible And I apologize. You must think I'm very fond of quoting the Bible because I did it last time as well.
Go for it.
The verse in the Bible says, all flesh is grass. And that is a very insightful, ancient scientific observation, because all flesh is grass. And this is what supports this amazing diversity of life. Grasslands across the world and in East Africa are incredibly important. If we think about the most spectacular wildlife drama that we experience every year, the migration of the wildebeest and other animals in and out of the Masai Mara through the Serengeti, that's all thanks to this stuff.
Yeah, that's the cause, the reason of the migration. The wildebeest are trying to get the grass that's supposedly greener on the other side.
Yeah, and if we were to follow the animals closely, let's walk into this clump over here.
Yeah.
And what you'll notice is this grass is very thick. And how are we, if we're an animal, how are we going to get in here and feed on it? And so one of the remarkable things about the grasslands of East Africa is that the different animals play different roles in facilitating and complementing each other. So what the zebra do is they walk into patches like this,
Yeah.
and because they can eat hay,
Right.
they've got the teeth and the stomachs for it, is they break open the clumps.
Oh, wow.
And now that allows, once after, imagine we're now a
Zebra,
feeding,
okay.
and that now allows other things to get in and eat the
shorter grass.
more nutrient-rich,
Yeah.
softer grasses. And after they've done, grass keeps sprouting from the bottom, and you have things like the white rhino, which in effect need very closely cropped lawns to feed on. And so all of these different species interacting, feeding on grass, help promote the diversity of mammals and the diversity of grasslands, because if grass remains ungrazed, it will become very tall. It becomes what we call moribund.
What does that mean?
So moribund means that grass gets very tall and it accumulates a lot of very dry leafy matter, like you can see here, that isn't actually very nutritious.
Okay.
And so now what really needs to happen is you either have animals that can feed on this and break it apart and promote new fresh growth, or a fire, a natural fire that burns through the grassland and allows now new growth and better competition between different species. So grasslands need grazers,
Yes.
and grazers need grasslands.
All right, and so many more of us actually need grass too. That includes farmers. We'll be talking about that and much, much more after the break. This is NTV Wild Talk. We'll be back in just a moment, but first, here is your chance to win an awesome prize. It's our wild guess question. Why is the red oat grass the most important grass in the Nairobi National Park? Why is the red oat grass the most important grass in the Nairobi National Park? To participate, just like the NTV Wild Facebook page. Only answers posted on the timeline post that is associated with this question will be considered. The first person to answer correctly wins free entry for 4 people and 1 vehicle to the incredible Nairobi National Park. You'll have the chance to see a variety of animals and see the different fascinating species of grass for yourself. The winner also gets 1 bottle of wine courtesy of Wines of the World and a gift hamper courtesy of Wildlife Direct. Terms and conditions apply. Last week's lucky winner was Sophia Murage. Welcome back to NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Here is a reminder of our wild guess question. Why is the red oat grass the most important grass in the Nairobi National Park? Why is the red oat grass the most important grass in the Nairobi National Park? To participate, just like the NTV Wild Facebook page. Only answers posted on the timeline post that is associated with this question will be considered. The first person to answer correctly wins free entry for 4 people and 1 vehicle to the incredible Nairobi National Park. You'll have the chance to see a variety of animals and see the different fascinating species of grass for yourself. The winner also gets 1 bottle of wine courtesy of Wines of the World and a gift hamper courtesy of Wildlife Direct. Terms and conditions apply. Last week's lucky winner was Sofia Murage. Now our conversation about the importance of grass continues. Behind me is the Nairobi National Park, and where I'm standing right here is the boundary of the park, marked by this river Mbagathi. And then beyond this river is now extra grassland, which is outside of the park. And what I notice is that the vegetation is very, very different. And Dino Martins, the entomologist and naturalist, continues to tell me more about this grass and this area. Now, Dino, tell us, where are we now? Because this park grassland and the grassland we're seeing ahead of us is significantly different.
That's correct. We're right on the very southern boundary now of Nairobi National Park, and you can see this dramatic transition between the park and literally just a few meters outside the park.
Yeah.
And there's much less vegetation, it's much more heavily grazed, and in the background we can see some cattle, some sheep, and pastoralism is a way of life that has been connected with grasslands on our planet and in Africa for tens of thousands of years. So pastoralism is at least 30,000 years old.
Wow.
So it's a fantastic way of making a living from this environment. But there are many challenges today with climate change, with the increase in the number of animals. What we can see out here is a situation where the grazing has reached a level that the grassland is actually starting to suffer from too much grazing.
Yes, and you can sort of get that sense because over here, when I just look over the edge, the grass does look so much shorter. In some areas, a little bit non-existent as well. And that is because of the overgrazing.
Yes, that's correct. So overgrazing happens when literally too many animals feed and trample and don't allow grass to grow back as quickly as it gets fed on. So we've already seen from the park that grass can cope with a lot of grazing.
Yeah.
But when it reaches a certain point, it can't cope, and then the ecosystem starts changing.
And of course, this is one of the major challenges that faces grass. It's at risk because of overgrazing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's just walk up here and we can look at the grassland and see how it's changing.
All right, let's do that. So this area here, Dino, looks extremely dry and very, very unhealthy, if I could say.
That's correct. And yet we're just a few meters away from what's a very robust, healthy grassland in the park. So why does this look like it does? Well, the fact is, this is being very, very heavily grazed by a wide range of livestock, sheep, goats, cattle, even camels in some places. But really it's the sheep and the goats and the cattle who are feeding on the grass here, and we can see a few of them wandering in the background.
They are, right.
And if we watch them closely, we'll note what they do is they feed on the very growing points. And you can see if we get down here on the ground, you'll notice the grass has been grazed down almost completely.
Yeah.
And at least there's still some left here. But because of the trampling, it doesn't get a chance to grow out and spread as it normally would.
Yeah.
So that lack of ground cover, it creates a feedback cycle. The soil becomes harder and drier, and you can feel it's very capped.
Compared to what we felt earlier in the park when you opened up the grass.
Exactly.
A huge difference.
And not much in terms of life living in the soil here.
Yeah.
And when it rains, you actually have a situation, as we can see right here, of erosion starting to occur.
Yeah.
Because the water runs off the soil, there's very little seed in this soil, and there's very low diversity. Right here, there are just 2 species of grass.
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah.
Compared to what we saw in the park,
Yeah.
which was a huge number of species. But why does this matter? One might argue that, all right, well, this is dry land. Nobody's really making use of it. So, what does it really matter?
That's a good point. Pastoralism is one of the most ancient livelihoods that we have on the planet. And we need to make sure it's done sustainably, because it's lasted for 30,000 years.
Yeah.
Is it going to last for even another 100 years? There's a big question mark in Kenya today because of this situation. We've got to restore our grasslands and allow them to be healthy and robust. And the reason for that is twofold. One, if we have the right balance of wildlife and livestock, it actually means livestock do better than just livestock alone.
Okay.
So the way they feed, cattle need the short grass, the bigger animals trample and open it up and create more diversity in the grassland of the more nutritious species that the cattle like to feed on.
Right. And Dino, just a quick question though. If this land is like this, it obviously means that the pastoralists are going to look for greener pastures for their cattle. And does that then mean that the cattle may be competing with the wildlife and aim for grass that's meant for wildlife?
Absolutely. And one of our big challenges right now is in all our national parks, virtually all of them, there are livestock invading parks and feeding on the grass. And one might say, why not? There's plenty of grass in the park, let the animals come in and feed. Yes, but the issue is there's also a lot of diversity of grasses. And if we turn parks into this situation, we will lose hundreds and hundreds of species. We are losing species right now. We're also changing the composition of species. We're allowing invasive species, for example, to get a foothold in areas that are overgrazed, which makes it even less likely to support either wildlife or people.
And invasive species, of course, threaten grass in a big way as well, don't they?
They do. They compete with grasses because they can get a foothold in a place that's been overgrazed.
Right, like
in a
this.
healthy grassland, it's much harder for them to establish.
Okay.
But it's another feedback cycle, because the more the invasive species, the less there is in terms of productive plants that either wildlife or livestock can graze on.
So what needs to be done then, Dino, with regard to overgrazing? What is the solution to protect the grassland?
Well, we need to go back and very much look at ourselves and think about how we value grasslands and how we value grass. We trample on grass every single day, and we never think about it. And we need to start thinking about it and managing it so that it can be a productive and healthy ecosystem to sustain our own life.
Okay, and there is still more that you need to tell us and show us about grass. Where are we heading to now?
We're going to head down out of the hot sun into the
yes, it
shade
is very hot.
by the river, and we'll talk a little bit more about grasses down there.
Okay, let's go for it.
Thanks.
So now Dino and I are sitting by the hippo pools, a beautiful background, and sitting amongst the grass. This grass looks so green and quite lush as well, Dino.
Yes, and you notice how it's beautifully mown.
Yes.
And this was not done by a lawnmower, but by the hippos themselves, who
really?
mow the lawn by coming out every night and feeding on the grass. And hippos and many other species, as we've talked about, are very much linked with the health of these grasslands. And what the hippos do is take the nutrients from the grass that they feed on and cycle it back into the water, where it supports fish and dragonflies and a whole food chain in there. So hippos are this essential connection between the grassland, the terrestrial habitat, and the aquatic habitat in the river.
Tell us more about this grass, because trying to pull it, and it is very strong.
Very tough. This is one of the wiregrass species. You can see why it's aptly named, because it's incredibly tough.
Yeah.
And if you were to try and eat that, you wouldn't get very far.
I'm not sure that I should try, but the hippos manage.
The hippos manage because they've got the teeth that are adapted for pulling it up and chomping it and chewing it. But it does mean that animals that eat grasses have to spend a lot of time feeding, because there's not a lot of nutrition in it, and they've got to move around and eat bulk amounts of food. And the way animals can do this is one, they've got teeth that are adapted for chewing and cutting up the grass, but they also have stomachs and digestive systems. And some of them are ruminants, which means they chew and eat the food twice. They regurgitate it, it goes into a chambered stomach and gets digested more efficiently. And they can be more picky feeders that way. Others are bulk feeders, like the hippo
Yeah.
or the elephant and or the rhino. They just stuff themselves full of food and then slowly digest it. But in both cases, it means they've got to spend a lot of time feeding, since there isn't that much nutrition in most of the vegetation they eat, in particular the grass. But in grazing on it, they create these beautiful lawns. And these places are hotspots for diversity. Just as we've been sitting here, you can see butterflies and dragonflies flying by. And so having this landscape that has a mosaic of habitats is really important.
Dino, we've talked a lot about how grass benefits wildlife and so many other things as well in this ecosystem, but how does grass benefit human beings in a big way? Farmers, for example.
That's a great question. At the moment, we're working on a revision of the grasses of Kenya, and we've got up to 620 species. And you might ask, why is it important that we conserve all of those 620 species? And the reason is that grasses are perhaps the one most valuable group of plants we have on the planet. So do you like drinking tea?
I do. I love tea.
Do you put sugar in your tea?
I don't.
Okay, well, most people do put sugar in their tea. And most of the sugar we use in Kenya comes from sugarcane. And sugarcane is a grass.
Oh.
Yeah, as is maize
Yeah.
or corn, wheat, rice. Many of the crops we grow are grasses, and many of them are tropical grasses.
Right.
And the reason they're such good sources of nutrition is because they've developed a different way of doing photosynthesis. So as we're sitting out here, we can see we have regular plants with broad leaves, and then the grasses with their much narrower leaves. So one of the challenge on a really hot day like it is today is, if you've got your leaf and you're doing photosynthesis, is you're losing moisture at the same time, because your stomata are open. You need to take in CO2 and fix it. That's what plants do, and create the basis of all life on the planet pretty much. But the way the grasses do it is they separate it. So they've got their cells that do photosynthesis inside a different part of their tissue, and so this means they lose water less. And it means they can do it better at higher temperatures. And they conserve moisture, and that's why they can grow and survive in conditions where many other plants don't do as well.
How can your average Kenyan that's watching, take advantage of all the grass that we have in a positive way?
Well, we take advantage of it every day by eating nyama choma.
Right.
because all flesh is grass, as we said earlier. And basically, you can do several things. There are farmers who actually grow grass for seed right now, and there's a big market for grass seed that's grown across Kenya, and this Kenya Seed Company buy that seed and use it to restore areas that have been degraded. It's sold to other countries that need to restore their grasslands. And perhaps many Kenyans don't realize, but all of the beef you eat in many other parts of the world, from Brazil to Texas to Australia, is thanks to Kenyan grass.
Really?
That's true, because way back in the 1920s and 30s, there were research centers set up in Kenya that realized that this grass has evolved to be eaten by animals because of all the big animals that fed on it, and it was the perfect grass for supporting a livestock industry. And so we have buffalo grass, which is one species that was taken to Texas, and almost 99% of the beef in Texas that's grass-fed is eating this one species of grass that came from Turkana.
Wow, from Turkana of all places. Gosh, so you're actually saying that grass from Kenya is exported to other countries?
It is, and that's why we've got to conserve this diversity, because right now in the Amazon, when the forest gets burnt, which is tragic, but it's burnt for livestock production, for beef production, they plant Kikuyu grass from plains. They throw the seedlings directly into the soil, and it grows very quickly, and it supports the livestock there. In many parts of the world, there's a huge amount of research ongoing on these grasses, and in Kenya today, there's such an opportunity to really celebrate this diversity. If we think about this beautiful place we're sitting in, why is it that we love grassland so much? And I think it's because as a species, this is where we evolved. We evolved in this kind of habitat. We learned how to survive in the savanna, and it's deeply entrenched in our psyche. And if you notice, when you travel around the world, many parks and many other places that people create, artificial landscapes, actually are converging on this idea of the savanna and the grassland.
Exactly, that rich, beautiful green color, for example, or the color of gold. I mean, you really can't imagine living in a place where there's very little grass. Some people travel to other countries and it's just a concrete jungle, but that splash of green makes such a big difference. How can we appreciate grass more? In fact, you know, grass is also used in a lot of sports. You know, without grass, how would one play golf, for example, or on a football pitch? So how can we appreciate grass?
You can appreciate grass in many different ways. One is visit the national parks, and when you're not looking at animals, spend a few minutes looking at grass, because it's really beautiful, it's interesting, it's exciting. And when you realize how many different species they are, how diverse it is, how it really is the most humble plant that we overlook every day, and yet without it we couldn't survive. None of our national parks could survive without these grasses. And I think that's the message I'd really love people to get, is that there's an amazing diversity of these plants in Kenya, and we need to look after them, we need to appreciate them, we need to learn more about them. So something I'd really like is for young Kenyans to get more involved in studying and understanding all these different grass species. We know almost nothing about most of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, Dino. Okay, well, you know, certainly hope you're listening, because in fact it is so interesting. I've got to say, as we were driving through the park, my cameraman Fidel and I were looking out and we were thinking, oh look, there's that eland, and look at how it's eating, you know, and it's there's the zebra, so it's pulling out the top bit, allowing space for the other grazers. So already we are so interested, and certainly hope that you are too. Dino, thank you so much for your time and explaining the fascinating world of grass to us on NTV Wild Talk.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that's it about grass. Now you've learned so much more. It's not just the green stuff that you see, you know, outside your car window, but it really, really is important, and we must protect it. Okay, from that, let us shift our focus now to our Wild Pick segment. These are some of the photos that you sent in that demonstrate your appreciation for nature and the environment. Here's a snap of Jose Maboy. He was at the Tsavo East National Park posing in a family photo at Nguntuni Lodge, and in the next photo watching elephants from Voi Wildlife Lodge. Jose was in Tsavo East for an incredible safari experience, he says. Then at the Chuka Forest, this is Magabi Pravin. He was just taking a selfie and says that he was there on a university field trip. He says he loves the fresh atmosphere there, away from the polluted city. On Mount Longonot, this is a snap of Eddie Moores. He seems like he was jumping for joy, and Eddie says that he was at Mount Longonot for a hike because he was embracing domestic tourism. This is Anthony Mwangi at the Shaba National Reserve. He was posing with elephants while on a camping tour in the park. Anthony says that he loves wild camping as his job and as a hobby. And then there's Betty Omai. She was in Doldol in Laikipia North. She was patting a tortoise, and Betty says that she was working there and it was an adventure because she studied environmental science and she loves nature. If you want your photo showcased on our Wild Pick segment, all you need to do is like our NTV Wild Facebook page and send a photo that shows you celebrating nature via private message. Include your full name, tell us where the photo was taken, what you were doing and why. And now here's what's coming up on the NTV Wild documentary series on Saturday night.
Half-Tail the leopard has at last revealed her new family. But what are their chances of survival in this hostile paradise? Our lion family too faces new dangers as the heavyweights of the African plains come trunk to face with the cubs. Amber the cheetah and her cubs missed out on a big meal and have to make up for lost opportunities.
Grasslands are amongst the fastest disappearing ecosystems in the world. The Kenya Wildlife Service is at the forefront of protecting such ecosystems through its parks. But you, of course, can play your role too. Come and visit the parks, look after this ecosystem and, by extension, the wildlife. That's it on NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you again next Tuesday at 10 p.m. That encourages you to...
This is why I was telling Salim, can we not...
Yeah, but let's just go down here for a moment. This river below me is River Magathi, and it is the ba-da-ba-da-da-da.
Bedded in your skin. It's terrible.
Oh, that's horrible.
NTV Wild Talk in partnership with the Kenya Wildlife Service and Wildlife Direct.